Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, one of the worst duos in hip-hop. If you've never heard their music together, consider yourself lucky, and if you couldn't tell that was a joke, a very bad one at that, then consider yourself stupid. But Dre and Snoop are back in the studio, and they're gearing up to drop their sequel to their classic 1993 project, Doggy Style. 30 years later, the sequel is going to be titled Missionary, and they had a lot of exciting things to say about the project, and some very interesting things to say about the current state of hip-hop, and how this album will hopefully improve the overall quality of music that we've been receiving, or at least create a positive shift in how rappers and producers are creating music today. So let's dive into everything the iconic duo spoke about in their interview with Stephen A. Smith. Dr. Dre, being the super producer that he is, was more so critiquing the current state of production within hip-hop, and Snoop Dogg was commenting more on rappers and how they create music today versus how they did it 30 years back. And they didn't sound too impressed with the current state of hip-hop, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that. So the first thing Dr. Dre touched on was the fact that when rappers create albums today, they don't really lock in with just one producer, and that kind of takes away from the cohesiveness of the overall project, because when you have 9 different producers lending their sound to a project, it's hard to achieve that same type of consistency. Whereas when you have one producer and one rapper, there's more of a clear vision for how the project should sound, how everything should flow together. And the producer doesn't just take the role of a beat maker, but they adopt that role of actually being more like an executive producer, ensuring that there's a clear direction with the overall album, lending a more bird's eye view of how the track listing should be sequenced, making sure the sound is cohesive.
Find your collaborator. I don't like the fact that there's like 9 different producers on one album. I like the idea of one producer on one album. Continuity is everything.
Yeah, where did that come from? Where did it come from where you got cats that want to be with 9 different producers on one album and stuff like that? When the hell did that start?
I don't know, but I don't like it. If you're a producer, you should be able to produce the entire album. That's what I thought it was supposed to be.
Right.
That's what I was doing at the beginning.
We could go back to all of Dr. Dre's solo albums, his projects with NWA, Snoop Dogg's first album, Doggy Style. The production on all those albums was basically solely handled by Dr. Dre. And if you look even further at 50 Cent and Eminem's projects, 50 Cent's first album, Get Rich or Die Trying, the production was handled either by Dr. Dre or Eminem for the most part. And all of Eminem's albums all the way up until 2010 with his release Recovery, each of his early classics, the beats were either handled by Eminem himself or Dr. Dre. Now, on a side note, it's pretty incredible that Eminem was able to give us classic after classic like the Marshall Mathers LP, Eminem Show, Slim Shady LP, and if it wasn't Dr. Dre handling the beats, then it was Eminem himself. He's definitely highly underrated as a producer. It's also pretty incredible to note that most of the highest selling rap albums of all time were produced solely by Dr. Dre. All the Eminem early projects, 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying, Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style had the highest first week sales for a rap album, all the way up until Eminem broke that record, which was with another album that Dr. Dre produced himself. So there's obviously immense value in what Dr. Dre's saying of a producer taking on the role of doing the entire album. J. Cole took this blueprint later on, about 20 years later, when he produced his first 3 projects basically solely by himself. I think every beat on 2014 Forest Hills Drive was made by J. Cole himself. However, if you look at some of the other biggest rappers of all time, they weren't necessarily always having their classic albums produced just by one producer. Look at Jay-Z. He had a multitude of different producers always locked in with him, whether it was Kanye West, Timbaland, No ID, Just Blaze, Pharrell. Like, he never had just one producer doing an entire album for him. Even Kanye West himself, who came in the game as a producer, never had a full album of his just solely be produced by himself or any other one producer. So I'm not sure if this necessarily was ever a real common thing within hip hop, or maybe Dre's referring more to the producers taking on an executive producer role, as in there used to be just one executive producer of an album and now there no longer is. But even Dr. Dre's more modern proteges like Anderson .Paak or Kendrick Lamar use many different producers when they're creating their albums. Snoop Dogg also touched on the difference between producers back then and now, emphasizing that in today's day and age, producers are more so just glorified beat makers, and even when creating beats today, it's a much simpler process as a lot of the drum patterns, hi-hats, kicks, samples, they're all pre-programmed in the softwares that beat makers are using, whereas back in Dr. Dre's day, everything had to be created from scratch. Now, I'm not a producer myself, but if any of you guys are, and you have been producing for a while, drop a comment explaining the evolution of production software and how it's become a lot easier to make beats. I'd be very curious on how the overall process was back in the day.
There's a lot of beat makers though, Doc. That's what the difference between your era and this era is, that there aren't too many producers as much as there are beat makers. It's so easy to make beats. They're giving you all these computer packages that has the drum loop, has this, y'all had to make the loop.
Now, Snoop also had some advice for aspiring artists on what they could do to make sure that their voice is heard and that their music is unique.
What would y'all tell an artist today?
Be original, because right now it's so much copycat, mimicking, sounding alike, imitation. Be original. Find your voice, find your production sound, find your ear for who you are, and be original. Even if it ain't hitting, stay you.
Now, Dr. Dre kind of touched on this, adding a pretty big sense of urgency in terms of there needing to be a change within the sound of hip-hop. With the emergence of mumble rap and the lack of originality that we've seen in hip-hop for many years now, it kind of seems like Dre's worried about it, and also slightly hopeful that there's a rapper somewhere out there in the world that's crafting the next big thing, the next big sound. Someone who's going to take that torch from a Michael Jackson, a Prince, a Dre, a Snoop, from all these greats, and bring a heightened sense of passion back in the game.
I feel like it's a change that's happening right now, you know, from all this mumble rap thing and everything that's happening right now. There's somebody in somebody's garage that's happening right now that's going to be the next Snoop or Dre or next Prince or Michael Jackson or whatever, that's coming up with something that's going to change the game. It's got to happen right now, and it's wide open because everything that's happening right now in the music game, especially hip-hop, is weird as fuck.
And while he is a little concerned and does express that hip-hop right now is in a very weird state, he's also saying that he's kept his ear on the internet and has seen a lot of kids with impeccable talent, and it's only a matter of time before one of them gets discovered and can influence that change and take hip-hop in a direction that it needs to go.
What is it about now that's happening that there's a level of urgency that makes you say change for the better?
Well, it's going to get back to the musicianship, like real players. And I'm seeing it happen. I'm on the internet and I'm watching Instagram and things like that. Mm-hmm. And there's like these kids that are coming up that can really play, can really write and sing and really doing some interesting rapping. And so I'm waiting for that to come back. By the way, I'm not disrespecting anything that's happening right now. I'm just talking about some substance that's getting ready to happen moving forward.
And then Snoop continued to touch on where things kind of went wrong, or not necessarily wrong, but where we kind of got into this pattern of the industry pushing this formulaic, substanceless music that has taken over and plagued real artistry as of late. Back in the day, there was no internet, so in order to stand out, your artistry needed to stand out. You needed to make incredible bodies of work so the word can spread and people felt inclined to talk about you. Nowadays, if you do something stupid online or you have a trendy line in one of your songs and then it goes viral on TikTok, that's enough to gain you enough traction where a record label would want to put money behind you and invest in a full-fledged career.
You had to have skill, you had to have professionalism in order to be an artist. Now you just have to have a phone. So it's a big difference when you had to have certain things to be qualified as an artist. Now it's just a phone makes you an artist, and something stupid or something crazy on the internet gets you 5 minutes of fame, and you take that and make a record and you got a 2.5-minute song that's saying the same thing that somebody else just said. Now you're considered hot, as opposed to it used to be about creativity, harmony, melodies. That don't even matter no more. It's just auto-tune.
And now Stephen A. Smith did come in with a good point, saying that it's not just the artist to blame. The lack of quality mainly comes from record label executives because they're the ones that are pushing the product. So they have the greatest influence on the direction that an artist should take. If the incentive is to get hot on TikTok, the record label is going to push the artist to make a song geared for TikTok. And if they don't have that, then it's either going to be much harder to actually get a full-fledged project out into the world, or they won't have as much money back behind them.
I've always come to the defense of artists, and I look at the industry itself, because if you're trying to make it and somebody's over and they're telling you this is what it's going to take in order for your music to be played, for you to develop and cultivate whatever your brand is, somebody is over you saying this is the way to go. And if you feel compelled, if you really, really want to make it, sometimes you got to listen to them.
But back in the day, it was kind of similar, right? I mean, we didn't have TikTok, but we had the radio, and artists were very incentivized to have a single that was geared towards radio. It was very hard to get an album out on a major record label if you didn't have a single first that was doing well on the charts or on radio. This would often lead artists to water down their sound in order to catch that hit. However, Snoop Dogg was emphasizing that him and Dr. Dre, that was never their approach. They never made songs for radio. It was always kind of radio, and the overall soundscape of what a hit should sound like was catching up to what they were already producing.
We never made music for the radio, right? We never was like, let's make a radio version. We always made music that felt good to us. Then when it got out to the public, if we had a label that had ideas of do a radio version and do this, but we never went into it with that intent.
And Dr. Dre kind of echoed these sentiments, saying this is how he was from the beginning of his career.
We just do what we feel in the moment, and that's what I've been doing from the beginning of my career. From NWA, the Police, and Straight Outta Compton and the whole nine. We're just doing what we feel. We just put it out there, and at the beginning we're like, fuck the radio. If they don't play it, it doesn't matter because we know what the streets is gonna say. And that's still my mentality.
And in terms of how they're approaching things differently now, Dr. Dre just says it's all about experience. He's much more experienced now than he was in '93. So in his opinion, he believes that this new album that him and Snoop are crafting is some of his best work, just because, as Snoop would put it, the chicken is now seasoned.
When we did the first album in '93, I was still green. I'm still learning the SSL mixing board and shit like that, but I'm seasoned now. So, I think this is some of the best music
That
I've
chicken
done.
tastes good now.
Yeah,
That
right.
motherfucker seasoned.
And then the conversation takes an interesting turn as Stephen A. Smith kind of questions Snoop and Dre's age right now and says, how could you be so confident that you're putting out your best work today when you're, in the middle of your 50s, Dre's approaching 60 years old. You guys were young back then. The sound was fresh. It was authentic. Hip hop is a young man's game. So it's interesting to see two vets, 3 decades into their careers, be so confident that right now they're making the best music they've ever been making. But Snoop had a good rebuttal to that and also confidently said that he was making better music 30 years ago than a lot of people are making today, which is absolute facts.
In your 50s, you're sitting here telling me that you think this might be your best work yet.
You don't ask questions like that to rock and roll musicians. You don't never ask what the age. So we should be age appropriately saying that our music is always going to outweigh how old we are. Because that music that we made 30 years ago still sounds better than some of this shit that's out right now. So what makes you think we can't outdo that? It's timeless. That's the only thing that's age is relevant to this record is it's timeless.
And as far as Snoop and Dre making better music 30 years ago than most artists are making today, Snoop said that his goal with this new project is really to reset the entire music industry, to make people inspired to create full bodies of work again, to make people feel like they need to put quality into the sonics and into the subject matter of the work that they're producing.
What are you hoping it accomplishes?
My thing with this album is to reset the music industry. Get back to musicianship, get back to making quality music, get back to having a whole body of work, and get back to having a project that visually connects to the sonics.
And in my opinion, it's very interesting to see Snoop and Dre talk so confidently on how much better music was back then than it is right now. A lot of the legends in the game don't really do interviews too much, right? Even, the big three of today, Drake, J. Cole, and Kendrick, don't really sit down and reflect on the state of music today versus where it was when they were initially creating it. Then you got guys like Jay-Z and 50 Cent, who are more focused on business ventures than actually making music in 2024. Then you got legends like Lil Wayne, Nas, and Eminem, who are actively making music in 2024, but seem to be embracing a lot of the new sounds, producers, and rappers of today. And instead of really criticizing it and drawing a line in the sand between their artistry and the newer rappers, they seem to be taking a different approach and doing their best to compete in the modern era. And while they still stay in their own lane, they don't seem to necessarily think that by them releasing music, it's going to create some sort of shift or positively impact the next generation. Instead, they seem to take inspiration from the current generation, but Dre and Snoop seem to be taking a way different approach. And Dre emphasizes this when he says that a lot of the new producers and artists today are using the same sounds, the same technology, the same production softwares, and that's why everything today sounds so alike. I mean, look no further than New York's drill scene, and you'll see that a lot of the rappers within that subgenre are using the same flows. A lot of the producers are using the same drum patterns and the same tempos within their beats. I mean, it's the same situation on the West Coast as well. You have producers like Mustard who have crafted an incredible sound. However, a lot of his beats, especially early on, had the exact same tempo. You knew it was a DJ Mustard beat as soon as you hit play. It's the same thing in the Bay when you look up a Draco the Ruler type beat or a Shoreline Mafia type beat. A lot of these instrumentals sound very, very similar.
I think that right now, the artists and producers are using all the same software and all the same technology, which is why all of the music sounds the same.
And Dre believes this has been an issue that has plagued the industry for the last last 5 to 10 years, and emphasizes that urgency that he feels to find that next artist who really cares again about the musicianship.
I think that all the music that has come out over the last 5, maybe even 10 years are using the same drums. The rolling 808 drum, all of these artists are using the same exact drum beats, which is a little bit of a cheat in my opinion. So I'm waiting for musicianship to come back, artists that are actually like really playing and not depending on the computers. I want to hear what the next level of hip hop is going to be and where it's going to go.
And Drake kind of expands on this and emphasizes that this started in the internet era, because nowadays an artist can just look up NBA Youngboy type beat or Lil Durk type beat, and they could download it and create the next hit. And that's why you get in this endless cycle of a lot of the artists having that same production or having that same sound, because it's so easy to just simply study a formula, have access to a plethora of beats, whether it's on YouTube or BeatStars, and just concoct the next hit that sounds like the last one. Whereas he's, again, really looking for that next artist who has studied music and cares about musicianship.
It started happening because of computers and the internet, and this software made it easy. You could just go and download a beat and rap over it and make a hit record. But now I think it's getting ready to turn back into real musicianship. People that are really studying music, getting in the studio and really getting down like that.
And then Snoop chimes in with, in my opinion, the best point in the entire interview. And I love how, Drake kind of polishes it up, makes it seem like he's really hopeful for the future, hopeful for those next few artists who have that sense of love for the musicianship and really studied this stuff. Whereas Snoop kind of comes in on the opposite end, like, F everybody. Everybody's doing it wrong. Music nowadays sucks. There's major problems with it, and there needs to be someone who comes in and saves it. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And he brings up a really good point when he starts talking about the issues of sampling in 2024. See, back in the day, a producer sampled an older record to elevate his own record. You would sample a certain vocal or a little pattern within the beat, and you would flip it and completely reconstruction it to make it your own. Kanye West is a prime example of this. I mean, even still today in 2024, he's always talking about how he's chopping up samples in the sunken place. He takes old records and breathes new light into them, chops them up and makes them completely different. Whereas you have this huge issue nowadays, especially with the rise of TikTok and people chasing those viral sound bites, they will completely steal an older record. They'll shamelessly steal records that were already hits, and they'll blatantly copy whatever aspect of that old record that made it a hit and put it into their new record. I can name you a million examples of this. Look at Nicki Minaj's Super Freaky Girl, or half the records off her Pink Friday 2 album that just came out last year. Look at Jack Harlow's latest #1 record, Lovin' On Me. I mean, the chorus of that record is literally just him taking an old song and making it the chorus of his new song. I believe Project Pat of 3 6 Mafia even came out recently and said that he collects royalty checks off tons of the biggest rap hits today, because tons of them are just sampling his old records. A great example, in my opinion, of someone who did the exact opposite recently would be Metro Boomin and 21 Savage on their recent hit record Red Rum, as they sampled this vocal and just looped it in the back of the beat, but it sounds extremely different from the original record, and it's very unique and distinct. You could recognize that melody as soon as you hear that 21 Savage song, but it doesn't sound like the old record that they were sampling. And I think that's exactly what Snoop Dogg was talking about here. You gotta breathe new light in the records that you sample.
Most of these hit records are based off of a sample. You taking somebody's music that was a hit and you redoing it. You either fucking it up,
that too.
Right? But now they fucking it up. It ain't like they making it better. Like, we complimented the sample that we use. If we took a sample from somebody, we didn't make your record depreciate. We actually made it appreciate, because you made more money because you had more eyes on it, and now it has a different sound or a texture to it that you probably didn't exist at that time.
But all in all, they did conclude this interview on a positive note. Dr. Dre was emphasizing that he's very excited to hear what the future has in store for hip-hop, and he really does hope that it's an artist who truly cares again about that musicianship and who cares about actual instrumentation. Someone who has either picked up an instrument themselves or has studied music enough to know how to construct it from the ground up instead of trying to copy whatever's hot right now.
I want to hear where it's going to go next, and hopefully it's like guys or girls that study and actually are playing. That's where I wanted to go.
But all in all, both of them had an extremely unique perspective on where hip-hop is today. I'm extremely excited for their new project. It sounds like it will be groundbreaking work. And I'm very happy that they didn't hold back from their criticisms of the current landscape of hip-hop. I'm happy they didn't sugarcoat anything. A lot of artists today will just embrace the new generation, say how much they love it, because a lot of people will call you an old head if you criticize anything new, especially when you were such a legend in the past. However, it's very important to note distinct things that are plaguing the industry. Things like the lazy use of sampling, the bloatedness of a track list that features a multitude of producers with no cohesive sound, everyone trying to sound like one another, everyone mumbling on their records, not truly studying the foundation of what made music creation great or hip-hop great, and trying to elevate that, innovate that, and bring something new to the game. If I'm not mistaken, this will be the first project solely produced by Dr. Dre since his 2015 release Compton, and if it's even half as good as what they're saying, then we're definitely in for something special, because if they're that confident that 30 years into their career, they're making the best music today that they've ever made, considering what they've already made, then I believe we're definitely in for something special. Another interesting side note is Dr. Dre said he never listens to his old music. He's never sat through the Chronic, 2001, any of the NWA projects, Eminem projects, or Snoop Dogg projects front to back. He's never gone through them and revisited them. He's always trying to come up with the next best thing. I believe this is probably what a lot of the greats do. I always wish that some of my favorite artists did go back and revisit their older work, however, like Kanye West or Lil Wayne. I could only imagine if they sat down and really studied what made them great with stuff like the Carter 3, or in Kanye's case, if he went back and looked at what he was doing on Graduation, took note of that, broke down the song structure there, his hook game on songs like Can't Tell Me Nothing or Stronger, or in Lil Wayne's case, his vocal delivery on records like Me and My Drink with that slurred out, auto-tune, alien-like delivery, compared to the gritty, darker vocals he was using on records like A Milli, or Three-Peat, or I'm Me. If they went back and studied those records that made them so great, that defined their careers, maybe they could take inspiration from that and elevate their music today. Or maybe what makes them so great is that they don't look at the past, they only look forward, and that's why they've been able to influence so much and start so many trends, because they just focus on getting greater and reinventing themselves. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Are you excited for this new Dr. Dre project? Do you agree with what Dre and Snoop are saying about the lack of musicianship in hip-hop today? Or is this just old heads hating? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
There's a lot of little nuggets in both of their disses that if it wasn't for these breakdowns, and salute to, guys like this, Rapaholics, because I think they directly get it.